Okay, it's loading. So in like 15 seconds. Oh, now we arrive.
Alrighty.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you see us? Type in the group chat a thumbs up. I think we can start because it says the broadcast has started. I think people are still joining though.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I see. Yeah, okay. Okay, they say they can see us. We're good.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm back again to bother you all. I'm also the moderators for another panel today. If you don't know who I am, my name is Nadirah Pierre, or I also go by Nadirah P. I am a social media influencer, a content creator, and a stand-up comedian. And I'm your moderator for the day. Today, we are joined by two amazing individuals, both of whom I'm pretty sure I've met.
Yes.
I think I met you, Aesetou, yes. We have Sister Aesetou Hydara and Brother Sultan-Diego Sulayman. As I mentioned in my prior panel that I moderated, I'm into giving everyone their flowers while they're living. So I will be reading their entire bio so you can know just who you are dealing with today. So first, Sister Aesetou Hydara is a South Bronx resident and child of Gambian immigrants. She recently graduated from NYU with a Bachelor of Arts. She majored in history and double minored in psychology and Africana studies. She is passionate about helping low-income and underrepresented communities. As the former president of the Black Muslim Initiative at NYU, oh, that's where I met you. She helped in organizing the first Black Muslim Symposium in New York City to highlight the rich and dense history of Black Muslims, as well as inform the wider community about our experiences. She is now a graduate student at the NYU Wagner School of Public Service on the Advocacy and Political Action specialization. She hopes to pursue a career as a public service advocate. So, alhamdulillah, again, this is Sister Aesetou Hydara, and Brother Sultan-Diego Sulayman is an Afro-Latino American Muslim from Montgomery County, Maryland. He is a recent finance major from Howard University School of Business, currently enrolled in Bayan Claremont's Master of Divinity Islamic Chaplaincy program at Chicago Theological Seminary. During his time at Howard, he served as the Economic Development Chairman of the National Association of Advancement of Colored People, president of their chess club, and president of the Muslim Student Association. He was instrumental in helping the MSA with the Bison Ball Award for Religious Org of the Year in 2019 and in 2020. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I already see Brother Keith Brown has started with the HU, you know. Y'all won't stop. But for the sake of time, we're just going to jump right in it. So a question that I personally have, and if you're unfortunately a part of Black Twitter, then you know that when we get into the conversations about activism, unfortunately, in the day and time that we live in, anybody can post a link to donate, post a flyer, say something controversial, and then next thing you know, you have people like Shaun King who are labeling themselves activists, who are really doing nothing at all, who have actually done nothing at all, who don't want to do anything at all. And it's very unfortunate. And that's not even to take away from internet and social media activism, because that's been very crucial in the fight for our liberation and our freedom as Black people. But from you two today, I must know, what do you consider activism? What is your own definition of activism and what it means to be an activist? And based upon your own definition, are you an activist?
Okay. So wow, we're starting off with that.
Yeah.
Krista, would you like to go first?
You want me to go first?
Ladies first.
Okay, ladies first, right? All right. So first off, that was a lot of questions. That's a really good question, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny because actually for one of my classes, I recently had to to write a paper about like
Mhm.
what an activist is and how do you define an activist and how do I see activism in my life. So that's actually funny. But for me personally, I feel like an activist is someone who truly wants to achieve social and political change in a certain community. It doesn't have to be in their community.
Okay.
Yeah. And I feel like unfortunately today a lot of like true activists, I say, aren't as popular in the media. They're the ones doing the behind the scene work.
Yes.
So I feel like that's
Mhm.
very true. They don't really like seek after fame and recognition for the work that they do. They're the ones who are really like, you know, underpaid, and they're the ones who, you know, are running around trying to truly achieve change in the communities that they're working to improve. Um, I personally would not call myself an activist because I feel like that's
Mhm.
such a it's an honor for me to achieve that title, and I feel like I haven't truly done everything to be called an activist yet. I'm on the road working on it. um,
Yes.
I would right now at the stage in my life where I am, where I'm trying to develop myself to truly impact my community. I would not call myself an activist yet. um, but yeah,
Okay.
activism, I like how you mentioned that, um, the example about Sean King, because I
Yeah.
feel like I've been seeing a lot of videos circulating on social media. Social media is such a powerful tool. I feel like a lot of people look down on it because it can be very costly, but I feel like it can impact in such a powerful way, especially because
Yeah.
a lot of people are using it.
Mhm.
It can definitely, like, I know there are downsides, but there's a downside to using any type of technology. But social
Yeah.
media itself is very powerful. But in summary, I
Yeah.
would not call myself an activist yet. Activists are people who truly want to enact change in their communities and are passionate about it, regardless of the pay, regardless of the recognition that they get. Those who really like are doing the humble work, I would say.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. So I'll start off with quoting Brother Malcolm. He said, "If you're not willing to die, take the word freedom out of your mouth." And so for me,
Mhm.
for activism, I believe people that are willingly, very passionately, and will lay their life on the line for the cause of the people, for the greater good, in all formats, by means to raise the conscious awareness, excuse me, for social political movements, for social political causes, for social political reforms.
Mhm.
This, of course, activism has different outlets, as I have witnessed, and I would say personally, I wouldn't call myself an activist. I would say I'm an active student,
Okay.
um, which means to me like I'm active, but I'm still learning.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because right now, as you mentioned, I'm currently in school right now, and so for me personally, I learned that in order to save somebody, you have to first save yourself. If you're on a crashing uh, airplane, you have to buckle in your seatbelt before you can check other people's seatbelts first. And so for me right now, with the course that America is going into, it's like a phoenix. It has to burn in order to resurrect. And so I feel as though, like for me personally, people that are activists are people that are in the fire right now, turning it, building
Mhm.
it back up to breathe a new spirit into America. And we could talk about that in forms of the voting, voter awareness for our people to vote, or as far as like the awareness for political reforms in your Congress
Mhm.
that the bills are currently being passed. Or we could talk about it as far as for the community level, as far as people doing do for self, which is something I highly emphasize on, because I believe personally our freedom will not come from the hands of those that are giving us that are our oppressors. I feel like
Mhm.
we as a people have the voice, have the strength in numbers, but like
Right.
again, Brother Malcolm said, he said we are not outnumbered, we are out organized. And so for me, I think activism, as far as for again for people that are willing to by any means necessary in a short sense to accomplish the goals of liberation, freedom, and change in this community. And so for me personally right now, I'm dedicated to education right now. So I wouldn't call myself an activist yet, because I'm still learning everything I need to become inshallah, an activist, or I would just say a person for my people.
That's great. Both of you making points to say that that's something that has to be achieved. That's something that has to be earned. That's something that you have to put in the work for. Like, you can't just get up and say, hey, I'm an activist this morning, just to let you guys know. So I love the fact that you guys pointed that out. And I think that's something that is heavily missed within our community, especially, like you said, Sister Aesetou, in the age of social media. It can definitely be mixed. So we have your bios here. We heard about, what you guys are into, what you guys are doing, but I want to hear the specifics of exactly what type of activist work are you involved in? Are you passionate about? Only so people can get a better scope of who you are and what you do and what you're working towards, and also to better help us understand how we can support you.
Ladies first this time?
Of course, all the time.
So great question again.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, actually, I'm focusing on activism work around the school to prison pipeline.
Mm.
Which is a personal, very deep issue that I care about. Because just a little background, like I was born and raised, I'm a child of Gambian immigrants. It's a country in West Africa, if you didn't know. But I was born and raised in the South Bronx. There's a predominantly Black and Hispanic community, which is very under-resourced to this day. And I grew up in the public school system, K through 12. So I've experienced and like seeing the systemic racism that is very deeply entrenched in the education system. Actually, right now, I'm a first-year master's student, as I said before, and I'm learning about it in detail.
Right.
And it's funny for me, like when we discuss things like this in class, because I'm in a class with predominantly white students, and it's like I'm the only one I'm one of the very few people who actually experienced it.
Yeah.
So like looking back on it, and I'm thinking like, I think at the time when I was younger, I didn't really realize how racist and biased the policies enacted against us were.
Right.
Now that I'm thinking about, I'm like, wow, this is like really messed up.
Yeah.
So that's an issue I'm very, very passionate about, because I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it how it can destroy people's lives. Like literally these harsh discriminatory policies being enacted against students for, taking out cell phones in class. You get sent to the court, 3-day suspension. And if you compare that to the statistics in, predominantly white schools, it's not the same. So like, it's so evidently clear, but it's so crazy to me how people can still deny it, and how it's still enforced. And this idea of school policing is very important to me, because I remember in high school, like one day, I think there was an incident the day before a fight, and then the next day, students arrived at school to see metal detectors and police, surrounding. And it made me, I remember feeling like, oh my God, like this is actually really scary. And they're sort of like criminalizing us in a way, like what would I have in my backpack? But these are things, daily occurrences that people, Black students, Black and Latinx students face every day.
Yeah.
And it's like I've experienced it firsthand. So I feel like that's definitely what makes it more personal for me. It's not right. So that's one thing I'm actually researching and trying to think of, like positive reform, just to make life easier for Black students, because I feel like that's the best I can do. I can at least try to attempt to do, because I wouldn't want any other student to feel that way that I did. And I can say that I wasn't particularly a bad student. I don't like that term, but like I was, I always got good grades. I was very polite, but those had it worse for me. Those were behavioral issues that they didn't even know they had, you know. They were picked out and saw, and those who, necessarily didn't think of education as a priority, because they worked 2 jobs and had to help with the kids at home. So there are so many circumstances that affect Black and Hispanic students that I feel like aren't considered in the education system. So there's a lack of empathy, heavy empathy, when it comes to students of color, particularly Black students. So that's one of the issues I'm actually really focused on right now. And emphasize that. Yeah. Did I answer the question? I'm sorry.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of the detail. That's amazing. May Allah make you successful in that. I mean,
yes. So I definitely want to say that I'm also emphasizing right now in my life education, activism, education of self, and education to others. And what I'm meaning by that is currently right now we're in election season. So what I do is I do voter awareness. I do voter registration. I also am signed up to be a poll worker at my election site. And the reason why I do this, of course, is because I'll give you some statistics, basically. We know that for the presidential election or presidential nomination, or I mean, president candidate itself is not nominated based on the popular vote, but on the electoral vote. But even with that said, there was like statistical data that showed references of people of color, specifically African American communities and Latino communities, that had they voted, it would have been a different majority outcome for their state. Because we do have as people of color, we do have a large population when we are united. Again, once we are organized together. But unfortunately, there's a lot of miscommunication, a lot of miseducation about my vote doesn't count. What is my president gonna do for me? Obama didn't do nothing. But the actuality of it was we had the largest turnout for Black Americans, but it was only 60%. That's actually what Obama quoted at. Now imagine if we did that at least to 80%, or hopefully one day 100%. And also in reference to the politics right now, we voted for Obama, which is the executive branch of government, but we was also supposed to go back 2 years to vote for our legislative branch of government for our congressman. And so when Obama had the highest position in the United States, unfortunately, he couldn't do anything because the House of Senate was Republican, and they were just vetoing and denying his bills that he was trying to pass. Fortunately, we still have universal health care. But currently, with the current administration in the White House, they're trying to bullish the Supreme Court with their judges, and then they're trying to, keep the congressman in place. So, I'm dealing with organizations that are specifically towards that. I'm a part of Black American Muslims voters, I believe. And I'm gonna shout out my man Jihad Salih. He put it together. We have representatives of the Black American Muslim community to spread awareness to why they should vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for 2020 because of their and again, people say. Ice Cube asked, "Look, what are you going to do for me?" He asked them, "What are you going to do for Black America?" Joe Biden has a actual 30-page document for Black America, but people don't know that because they don't read. They just go off of social media. So that's why I really avoid calling myself an activist, because most of these interactions right now are through social media, and social media could be a good tool. But as far as to what I said, as far as for education, I'm doing education of self. I'm reading a couple of books right now, revisiting Malcolm X and whatnot. This is a great book as far as to what you said, sister. This discussed the new Jim Crow as far as the new school to prison pipeline. And, I'm really just, I use social media as a tool to spread awareness. If I'm not doing activism right now in my life, I connect people who are, like my friends at university, the current president of the NAACP, Ania Veens. She created her own organization, her own movement called the Live Movement, and she's working with Occupy DC, which is currently spreading awareness to the reforms they need against gentrification and homelessness. For the indigenous people of DC, or basically the DC natives. So that's what I do. I'm connecting with organizations, ACLU, Black Lives Matter. And and this is the last thing I want to say, as far as for Black Lives Matter, a lot of people have a misconception for the Black Lives Matter organization, saying they only care for police brutality, but that's not necessarily true. They care for all people of people of color, because when Black Lives Matter, then all lives will matter. The only reason that they focus on police brutality itself is because
Right.
brutality is an example of systemic racism and white supremacy. However, when there's a quote unquote, and I don't agree with it, because there's no such thing on black crime, but when people do crime to people in their own communities, they get justice for that. They go to jail. So there is justice, and we do take care of our own people. So I just try to educate the miseducation of the Negro. Carter G. Woodson.
Okay, I got you. So thank you so much for that. And now that we know what you do, now that we know specifically what you're into and what your niche is, something that I feel like if you're a Muslim in activist circles, it's unavoidable you're going to come into contact with other Muslims who are not necessarily Black. And it's very unfortunate, but anytime that you are doing work as a Black activist for Black people, they try to make it seem like, well, that's separate from Islam. It's like, they're like, oh, you're kind of being extreme, like you're kind of doing a lot. So I want to know, and I want the people to know, how does your Islam, how does your spirituality play into the work that you're doing, the work that you are trying to do? How does your Islam inspire that? How does it guide that? How does it spearhead that?
So for me personally, like my Islam is what drives me to sort of reform my community. It's mentioned throughout the Quran many times to give charity and be kind to others, treat people how you want to be treated. And definitely that's the backbone in pushing me to sort of take on this role take on this role as someone who can enact some sort of change wherever I see oppression, wherever I see brutality in my community and other communities.
Okay.
Be merciful and compassionate. So spirituality, faith plays a huge part in everything that I do. I'm sorry, what was the other question?
I think that was the whole question. Just how does Islam play a part in your activism?
Okay. Yeah, and you also mentioned how, like, as Black Muslims, when you encounter other Muslims who aren't necessarily Black, and they make certain comments, I personally feel about those comments, I feel those are the people who don't even know anything about Black Islam or Black Muslim history, but they love to jump and shout, oh, you shouldn't use the term Black Muslim because you're separating us. Okay, sure we are. But when Black Muslim brothers and sisters are being killed on the street and they're being where are you, you know? And the issues that are important to us aren't important to you. But when it comes to, you know, Palestine, not to be like, I'm not salty or anything, but like when it comes to certain issues, Black Muslims are always at the forefront. But when we need sort of allyship, it's not the same. The turnout
everybody's missing.
That's definitely true. So I personally feel like just check yourself. Like really reevaluate when you have comments like that, non-Black Muslims. So why are you seeing like the term Black Muslim as a sort of division when it necessarily you know? And I feel like that in itself is a bit just wrong to say. So just check yourself and don't be educate yourself as well, which I always try to say, like educate yourself. The whole purpose of this conference is for people to educate themselves about the history of Black Muslims, the experiences that we face. So on some level you can empathize and try to reform with us, you know? So, yeah.
So definitely I feel you, sister. And before I answer that question, I just want to address what you said. As far as for like when people have a problem labeling us Black Muslims, I just want to give an analogy. So when you see a Chinese man doing for Chinese people, is he a Chinese nationalist? Or when you see a Palestine person doing for Palestine community, is he a Palestinian nationalist? No, he's just doing himself for his community. So why is it that we have to be labeled Black nationalists when we want to do for our communities? And again, that stems from anti-Blackness, which I'm glad you brought up, because my identity as a as an Afro-Latino Black American Muslim, of course, but specifically as a Black Muslim, that stems my roots. Because my Blackness is my Islamicness. Because if we know from an Islamic standpoint that we are not foreigners when we become Muslims, because our ancestor was Muslims with the first Hijra to Abyssinia, and Mansa Musa leading the pilgrimage from West Africa to East Africa, and you know, it really just hones in that our ancestors are with us in this fight. And for justice, and Islam has to be at the forefront. Muslims have to be at the forefront because we know better. We know the stories about Prophet Musa. We know in our Prophet Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what he did in the span of 23 years is something that he left behind 1400 years ago that we still carry on in our hearts and in our traditions and in our religion. So we have tools to liberate ourselves, and I feel as though because I'm learning about the Black Muslims in our Islamic history from the Invisible Muslim workshop with Sister Aisha Prime, Dr. Baral Ware, and of course this workshop we're having right now. There's a miseducation purposely done to exclude our Blackness. Bilal was not the only Black Muslim that was in the time of Rasulullah. But the reason why we don't have a connection to our Blackness is because we're getting our education from people that aren't our people. And I'm not saying that as far as like don't break bread with your Muslim brothers, but I'm saying that if they don't recognize your Blackness, they don't recognize your Muslimness as well. So that's why we need education from African scholars. We need education from Black Muslim scholars, because they too have a long lineage in Africa scholarship, and that's something that we do at Howard University. Right. We bring our own people, and we also bring people like you too. You know, we bring people that just include us in the conversation. That's and I really feel like, you know, for a Black Muslim identity, you can't take away the two because they're interconnected. Because we was here before Malcolm. You know, we was here. The ancestors that came from West Africa, they were Muslims. We was not we are not slave people. We was enslaved people, but we were never slaves. We were scholars, we were thinkers, we were Muslims, and if we was Muslims then, we're still Muslim now. So I can't separate my Blackness and my Muslim identity.
Right. Thank you for that. That's something that unfortunately you have to deal with in activism, because it's like, dag, I'm already fighting to stay alive, but now you want to come here and have a tussle with me about race. You know what I mean? And I think even from your everyday, just modern day Muslim, there's so much disconnect in even the knowledge of knowing how deeply rooted activism is in Islam, to the point where I would go so far as to saying that it's an obligation. It's an obligation. We know as Muslims, you change it with your hand. If you can't change it with your hand, change it with your speech. You can't change it with your speech, you change it with your, at the very least, you hate it in your heart. But you have to start from a place of trying to change it with your hand. So meeting, you know, Muslims who are very much so okay with ignoring, like you said, Aesetou, Black Muslim issues. You know, as soon as something happens, they're like, oh, you know, anyway, onto something else, onto an Arab country or a South Asian country or something like that. You're not realizing that you're passing up on your obligation. And I tell people all the time, I hope you are fully prepared to answer to Allah as to why you pick and chose what you wanted to care about. So I must know, and I always love to ask Black activists, especially, who is, and it's so hard to single it out because there are so many, but who is an activist, dead or alive, that inspires you or has inspired, you know, you to get into activism, and why?
Ladies first.
That's a good question. You, um, um, so I feel like I want to think about it more, but I'm okay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna be honest. One of the activists that I'm most inspired by, which I feel like we all are, is Malcolm X. I remember reading his autobiography for the first time in like ninth grade. So it
Right.
was like, I was in English class, but I was one of the good students. So there was like five of us who was put to the back. We did that heavy reading, and she gave us
Yeah.
my Mr. autobiography. I was like, I feel so special, and I'm like, I started reading it, and I'm like, he's Muslim, and he went through so much,
Yeah.
and I feel like his words, his actions, the tribulations and trials that Allah put him through, and the person he became, even though it's so funny at the end, his own Muslim brothers wanted to kill him. So for me,
Yeah.
thinking about his story and how he's just like the epitome of resilience, it just inspires me. I remember I had to also write like this 20-page paper about his life.
Mhm.
And I went through the stages, and I'm like, I don't even know how I would be just going through like the first like 10 years of his life. Like I
Yeah.
don't know what type of person I would be. So he went through all that and came out totally reformed on the other side. And he experienced racism, like true raw racism.
Right.
And for me, that just inspires me how he just got back up and continued going.
Mm.
And it was just like Islam was just meant for him. Like it was meant for him. And I always truly believe that Islam is a blessing in that case. In his case, it definitely was. And to this day, people convert in his name
Yeah.
and in his
Mm,
story.
mm.
And it's just so beautiful. And so like a past activist who still has influence today is definitely Malcolm X on me.
Okay.
And also very inspired by just beautiful Black women who are changing the world,
Right.
like Aisha Prime,
Mhm.
like Village Auntie.
Mhm.
Um, all of these just like strong, like Dr. Camilla Rashad. I remember she just helped me change the way I even thought about, mental health
Right.
in the Black community, in Islam in general. Like there's so many Black women scholars and activists who are changing the world. So seeing them motivates me to go on because I see them. I see myself in
Yeah.
them. So definitely today they're the ones who keep me motivated. And then I keep the quotes of Malcolm X and all the other Black activists who came in his time who truly just wanted to reform the world to make it a better place. Um, Even if like however corny it is, like I like truly believe that, like, if you truly believe that, I feel like okay, just to get my words together,
Mhm.
like a lot of people think they don't have enough influence, like as one person to change the world.
Yeah.
You're that one person who wants to take a step forward, like just taking that step forward to try to reform your community, it sort of encourages others to join you, and that's how you truly make the change. And I feel like all of the people that I'm looking up to truly believe in that and take part of that sort of idea. So I'm very inspired by that and their behaviors and their selflessness and their humility, their mercy, their kindness, compassion, and just true resilience and fierceness, in everything that they do. And that's one of the things I actually loved about Malcolm X. Like he was so fierce, unapologetic, and you see his speeches, and I'm like wow.
Yeah.
And you even see the commentary, like these white people, like like even how they describe him, like fiery tone, and I'm like, yeah, yeah,
I
like he
know.
knew, like
Yeah.
they felt it. I'm like, that's why they were so like scared of the change that he could make, that he could implement. And still to this day, alhamdulillah, like look at the influence that he has on this society in this world.
Yes.
So I'm gonna have to agree with the sister, of course, with
Mhm.
brother Malcolm X inspire me. Actually, I tell people all the time, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X before I read the Holy Quran. And that's just how it was for me because, like, for Malcolm X, I personally saw myself in him, and I saw the possibilities that I could become like a transformation, within my life of the manifestation of being a real man. And also, I want to say for Malcolm X, with what the sister said, yes, he was fiery, yes, he was strong, but he was also kind. A lot of people have this, and I'm not saying this is what the sister was saying, but I'm saying a lot of people have this representation of Malcolm as an angry black man. But he had, alhamdulillah, mashallah, he had 5 beautiful daughters, and he was kind-hearted to all of them. He was a girl dad. Rest in peace to Kobe Bryant, of course. And so I wanted to also say, for the people that inspire me, that are currently alive, are our Black women Muslim activists, all our Black women Muslim scholars. Because Malcolm X said, and Malcolm was and if we want to know what a feminist was, we look at Malcolm X too, because he was supportive of women's rights too. And here's a quote from Malcolm X. Malcolm X urged women to assume the chief responsibility for passing on Black cultural traditions to the children, and to imbue Black men with political militance. Educate a man and you educate an individual, Malcolm said. Quoting the African proverb, educate a woman and you educate an entire family. So I've been greatly inspired by a lot of Black Muslim scholars, like you said, Aisha Prime, Dr. Nisa Muhammad, Dr. Camille Rashad, Dr. Suad Kabir, and activism such as Sister Linda Sazor, who's a Palestinian Muslim. I really draw a lot of strength just from seeing that sister like really put on for the Black Lives Matter movement, to the point it's like, dang, Diego, what are you doing? And you Black, you know? And I love to see it. I really love to see it, because that shows what Islam is. Islam is universal. Born from different mothers, skins of all colors, come together as brothers and sisters. That's the beauty of Islam. And the reason why she's doing that is because she's not a nationalist, but because she's a Muslim. And when we understand, like when looking at what Malcolm X wasn't a Muslim by name. His name was Malcolm X. But he was a Muslim by character, which is why his name is also El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, which we both recognize. So like he really embodied what Dr. Bilal Wale says as a walking Quran. He may not have spoke Arabic. He may not be able to recite Quran, but the Quran was written on his heart. And so for the people I look up to, inshallah, I really sincerely believe that the Black Muslim scholars and activists I just mentioned have the Quran written on their heart, because they have the compassion for their people and for spreading Islam and being active for social justice for all people of oppression.
That's amazing. Sorry. Definitely. The autobiography of Malcolm X never gets old. I think every single time you read it, you find out something new where you're like, dang, this is a little crazy, but very inspiring. So the last question that I have for you guys, and then we have a question from somebody in the audience, just to make sure we're keeping it with time. Being a Black person in this time in general, but especially being in the activist space, where you're seeing more than a daily Black person is, where you're experiencing, more than a daily Black person is, and you're coming into contact with so many people, can be very draining. Can easily drain your spirit, can easily drain your mind, and can easily lead you to begin to despair that anything will change, that anything matters, because white supremacy is so slick that every time you think you've taken 2 steps, they push you back 20. So as activists, as Black activists, as young Black activists who are Muslim, what are you doing, or what are you practicing to keep that hope alive? So when you have a bad day, or you see something crazy, or you just have something that just, takes that light right out of you, what are you doing? What are you practicing? Who are you talking to? What is going on in order for you to keep that hope, in order for you to keep your spirits high, and in order for you to keep working for the betterment of your people?
That's a very good question. It is honestly very draining.
Yeah.
Especially having to always, especially to those who seem as like they're well-intentioned, always trying to explain your experience and how it drives. and just constantly having to validate those experiences, it is very
Yes.
so what some processes that I try to take to sort of like, when at the end of the day I'm like drained and I'm just like, I cannot do this anymore.
Yeah.
Definitely rely on the people I have around me, my loved ones, sort of like rant to them, whatever it is I'm feeling, because that is a form in itself of healing.
Okay.
Talking about what's bothering me, what's ailing me, and how I feel, just letting it out. Because especially in my community, I feel like we don't do enough of that.
Yeah.
We're just bottling it up. It'll let itself out one way or another. And no, that's not how emotions work. So
Yeah.
definitely letting those emotions out through communication and just like venting.
Yeah.
And also just creating safe spaces. Like that was honestly one of the reasons why I was so passionate about the Black Muslim Initiative at NYU.
Yeah.
And even besides the comments of like, why do you want to create a separate space for Black Muslims? I was like, it necessarily isn't even that, but it's more of like creating a safe space so that people who have the same experiences as you can validate you, because you need that no matter what you say. Like you might not say you need people's validation, but you just need to feel like
Yeah.
experiences are shared, and that you're not just feeling something that's like totally like bizarre, but it's more of just like, oh, I see you, I hear you,
Yeah.
that sort of information. And you get that from people who share those experiences, people who look like you. And everyone needs that space in order to heal. So definitely creating those safe spaces, being a part of those safe spaces, having your loved ones always checking in on you and ranting to them,
Yeah.
mental health, even doing yoga and lighting candles, which I love to do. And
Mhm.
like doing aromatherapy, smelling essential oils and all that. It really relaxes my body.
Mhm.
So I'm
Yeah,
like, things
yeah.
like that. Just I feel like growing up, I didn't really like um sort of put much emphasis on.
Mm.
'Cause,
Yeah.
those like sort of like privileged things. Like I felt like I
Yeah.
have access to that. And growing up, I'm like,
Yep.
what are you talking about? Girl, go take a bath and light some candles and feel nice.
Right.
Like talk to your friends over Zoom or that, or if you can see them in person, alhamdulillah, create an event, reading circle or something like that. So just taking the time to truly work on your mental health is so important. And I feel like a lot of people don't take advantage of that. But I feel like a lot more people are now, because you see how important it is. And
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yes.
So yes, that was a great answer, and I can answer this in so many different levels. But I'm gonna start with a family-based answer. So my father and my mother, they taught me Islam. And so for me, like when I was growing up, whenever I had a bad day, my father would just, talk to me, say, "Hey, Diego, how's your day going?" and stuff like that. To the point where when I was growing up dealing with anti-blackness, anti-Islam,
Yeah.
anti-inclusion or non-inclusion in PWIs or white spaces, I didn't have an identity per se.
Yeah.
I didn't know myself at all. So going back to my parents, because I was connected with my parents growing up, I was connected with my parents as an adult now. So fast forward when I decided to go to Howard University, HU, it was a black space. It was a historically black college and university, and it was really where I developed myself as a man that I am today because of the empowerment that my roots and my lineage and my heritage and my culture and my education all came from black scholars. And specifically, this is where I found the HUMSA Muslim Student Association led by Dr. Nisa Muhammad, who really instilled into me the program that I'm into now for MDiv and Islamic chaplaincy. So whenever I'm feeling like I'm having a bad day, and the interesting about it though, the interesting thing is, I'm personally, I have good days. I really have good days because like I'm the type of person to find the good out of the bad. But typically, I notice that bad news comes from social media. If anybody else sees that, and what I mean is like the outlets that people use, and like you said, Sister Nadirah, white supremacy comes in many forms, and that also comes in social media activism because of misinformation and like people like I don't like trauma. I call it trauma porn when you're promoting videos of people getting killed.
Yeah.
That's triggering. I don't understand who you trying to if you're trying to appeal to the senses of the people that are getting killed, that's not appealing to them because we already know this because we was instilled that before we knew our names because of because we felt like she said there's discrimination in African and Latino and Black communities just in their school system. So we don't need a reminder about that. And then if you're trying to appeal to the people that are doing the killings, well, like Malcolm X said, animals only speak the language of beasts. So why try to make sense with them in English? Like, it doesn't make sense. Why would you try to talk to a savage that is killing people? So really, like when those videos pop on my timeline, I see where it comes from and I unfollow them, or I try to see where it is. I try to report it.
Right.
I personally don't believe in that type of spreading awareness. If you're gonna spread awareness about a subject, then spread awareness on the solution, not the problem. Because if you're just providing a critique of the problem, then you're adding to the problem that's already present that we already know of. We don't need to talk about racism. We are Black men and women in America. Racism came when we was born. That was on our birth certificates. So we don't need to have that conversation. We need to talk about the change, and we really don't need to talk about it. We really need to be about that action. And so what I do is I take breaks, like for example, like rest in peace to the people that passed away, or I wouldn't even say passed away, got killed and was assassinated and became martyrs. Sandra Brain, Fernando Castile, Amir Abrali, Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, and of course, Trayvon Martin. May they all rest in peace. Their lives were cut short. And so for me personally, I have a connection with them because I really care for them as an individual and not just a name on paper. So sometimes I'm still coping with the loss of Amir Abrali. I'm still coping with the loss of Elijah McClain, still coping with the loss of Breonna Taylor, and even Trayvon Martin. So I take breaks from social media because that's where it's all coming from. Because personally, my life is pretty good because I don't hang out with people that aren't on the same wavelength as me. Like I'm about like goodness. I'm about good vibes, positivity. I don't hang out with negativity. But social media gives heightens the loudness of ignorance. So what I do to downplay it is I downplay my time on social media.
Okay, that's definitely a great game plan, and you have to. Like, you're not going to survive it every day on Twitter, taking in all that information. So thank you guys so much to our amazing panelists, Aesetou, Hydara, and Sultan-Diego, Sulayman. This was an amazing conversation, and you guys brought up a lot of good points, a lot of good points. Are you open, if there's anybody on the call that wants to get into activism, are you open to having a conversation with them? Can they reach out to you? Can they email you? Can they find you on social media and talk about it?
Yes, definitely. I'll put my contact information in the chat.
Okay. So please, anybody on here, if you're thinking about getting into activism or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to them. Please feel free to let them know how they can be of service to you. And may Allah reward you on your path to activism. May Allah keep you safe, because I know it definitely gets crazy for Black people that are within those spaces. And thank you guys so much for having me and allowing me to moderate this conversation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. You've been phenomenal, sister. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Okay, so would you like me to end the broadcast? Or
Do you guys have to go on to another
well,
another?
yes, I do. So if everybody's still listening, we're going to end this workshop session, and please get ready for the next workshop session. All the information is in the lobby. So once this workshop session ends, then just join to the lobby. Okay, everybody.
All right. Thanks so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.